told Raul, I said, it's the most beautiful lake I've ever been on. If we ever do it again, we must camp overnight.
Yeah.
And here we are, it's taking us less than 1 hour. It's fantastic. And it is really a beautiful lake. I think one of the most beautiful lakes that I have ever been on.
Let's see if we can get some trout here.
Yeah, maybe we catch it.
The boat arrives at the southernmost tip of the lake, and Mel and crew disembark on the shores of the Los Alerces River, which is named after the 60-meter-tall millenary trees which surround this unique and majestic corner of the world. What follows is an improvised Patagonian-style picnic, the prelude to a great afternoon of angling. The waters of the Menendez are crystal clear, which makes for excellent sight fishing. If you're going to fish a lake, this is truly the best way to do it. There's no guessing. To spot the prey and cast. Mel is above all a teacher, and a teacher's never off duty, especially when surrounded by those who share his same passion.
It's a pull through this rather than a push through. This is no, 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 sí, sí. Comprende? Even on a roll cast. You get much more velocity and control with this. Where are we going to fish? We're going to hit this shoreline? Okay.
A very tired group is ferried back to the lodge after an active afternoon of fly fishing. The next morning takes Mel on a ride down the Arrayanes River, across the Futalaufken Lake, and into Lake Krieger. All in all, over an hour's trip.
I can tell you the story, gentlemen, of my first trip to Argentina. I was looking for somebody that could be an outfitter, that could show me where the waters were and whatnot. There were only 2 or 3 really professional guides around Bariloche. So they sent me to a guy named Laddie Buchanan. Laddie expected clients to understand that he was going to fish also. I brought a guide down who was a very, very famous rod builder and fly tyer. His name was Gary Howell, and he resented Laddie a little bit. He was one of those guys straight out of a magazine, and Laddie looked like he'd been just dragged through the mud. Well, Laddie was catching fish, and the rest of us were not catching too many. And this guy was convinced that Laddie was sending us off to the poor water, and he was fishing the good water. So he started complaining. And Laddie said, "Let me see your flies." This guy pulls out of his vest 30 boxes of the most beautiful flies that you'd ever seen. Laddie's jaw dropped down to his waist. He said, "Man, you've got everything you need." With that, Gary said, "This water that you put me on right here hasn't got fish." Laddie said, "I'll show you I can catch a fish there." He reached into his vest. He pulled out an aluminum box, and when he opened it up, there was a huge entanglement of monofilament. And Laddie kind of giggled a little bit, and he said, "You wouldn't believe this," he said, "but I find all of this good stuff on the rivers." Well, he dragged out about a piece of monofilament, maybe 3 feet or 4 feet long, tied it on the end of the fly line. In the meantime, Gary's jaw began to drop. He opened another box, and in this box was maybe 100 flies, all tangled together. The crummiest looking flies that you have ever seen in your life. Laddie tied that onto the end of the leader with a granny knot. He went out and made 3 casts, and he nailed a 4-kilo fish. Unbelievable. We stood there with our mouths open, and Laddie then said, "Gary, if you'll walk down this stream another 20 feet, there's another fish down there. Try that out." Gary walked down and he caught another fish of maybe 2 or 3 kilos there. Laddie was a super fisherman, a wonderful guy, and I miss him terribly.
What makes Patagonia really special is the fact that leaving a very beautiful place only means you are traveling to a more spectacular one. As Mel departs the national park, an evening arrival awaits at Chaloaquén Lodge, situated a few miles away from the town of Trevelin. The Futaleufú River, also known as the Rio Grande, is born in Argentina and then flows across the Chilean border on its long journey towards the Pacific Ocean. It is a wide river with fast waters, and accessing the prime fishing location require a boat. Longtime guide Guillermo Seguí, who has covered this area for many years, is at the helm, as both men are en route to the first fishing hole of the day. In a drenching Patagonian rain, different pools are tested without much success. That is until Guillermo leads Mel to a holding pool located under the glaze of overgrown willows, which provide a very adequate food source for the resident trout.
What a miserable day, guys. I mean, you gotta be a little nuts to be fishing in this weather, really. Maybe we have to remember the words of Robert Trevor and that great little thing he did called Testament of a Fisherman. It just simply says, you know, I fish because I love to. I fish because the environs where fish are found are invariably beautiful. I hate the environs where crowds of people are found, which are invariably ugly. Because in a world where most men seem to spend their lives doing things they hate, my fishing is at once an endless source of delight and an act of small rebellion. Because trout do not lie or cheat, and cannot be bought or bribed or impressed by power, but respond only to quietude and humility and endless patience. Because I suspect that men are going along this way for the last time, and I, for one, don't want to waste the trip. Because, mercifully, there are no telephones on trout waters. Because only in the woods can I find solitude without loneliness. Because bourbon out of an old tin cup always tastes better out there. Because maybe one day I will catch a mermaid. And finally, not because I regard fishing as being so terribly important, but because I suspect that so many of the other concerns of men are equally unimportant and not nearly so much fun.
As morning breaks, a fresh coat of snow reveals that winter is around the corner in Patagonia. Today, Mel journeys downstream. This is a secluded portion of the river, and it receives very little pressure. A selective rainbow is spotted nearby, and the afternoon turns into a battle of will and skills.
little thought about a man named McGuane. The fact that the silences between catches are the thing that distinguish the real fisherman.
Mel is now in Tierra del Fuego, the land of fire. Much can be said about this island at the very tip of the world. But as far as fly fishermen are concerned, the most valuable asset in this region is called the Rio Grande. If you have ever fly fished or are even remotely considering picking up the sport, then everything you have done until now or are planning for your future will eventually lead you here. There is no better river, no bigger trout, and no higher volume anywhere on this great earth. Hands down, the absolute best fly fishing experience any angler can have.
And said, Mel, we need fishermen in Argentina. We've got wonderful fishing there. And I said, I want to go to Tierra del Fuego. I've heard about it and blah, blah, blah. But we came down here and the conditions were muddy and rough and the wind was blowing. But I loved it a little bit. I got a feeling. And Jorge Donovan is one of the pioneers of fly fishing down here. And he talked the Carrera's family into putting a lodge on the river. But the first group that ever came to this lodge was my group. This river to me is so special. I will never come to Argentina without coming down here. You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is a 10. And probably the next best sea trout river in the world is a 5. I do lessons in the two-handed rod. I'm bringing a video at the here down in two-handed that I did in Iceland. And I love the casting, you know. When I really have the opportunity, I use the two-hand one day and one hand the next day. And I must tell you, when I pick up that one hand, when I did the video, I sent it to Ernie Schwiebert. He said, I don't feel the need for the two-handed rod. And he said, landing a fish with one is a bear, with all due respect. He said, leave it to the English to invent a sport where you have to have a servant. We will touch our crystal glasses and drink our Malbec from the ringing edge in a toast, not to what is going to be, but to now.
Mel's many trips to the Rio Grande are, of course, full of anecdotes. These are made special by the guides. They're the people who fish the river day in and day out. Steve is not only the manager at Cautapen, he's also been here for the longest, and as such, he is the keeper of some of the best secrets hidden in the dark and shallow waters of this river.